Welcome, everyone. Wes Kindry, as Stephanie mentioned, I'm from Landscape Architectural Services. Back in February, we had started this renewal plan with our first PIC. Landscape Architectural Services, along with the Ward 1 office, is developing a renewal plan of HAAA grounds. The renewal plan is really to look at HAAA and look at the existing amenities that are there that are aging. A lot of those amenities are at the end of what would be their life cycle and they're ready for replacement. In order for us to do that, we wanted to take an overall high-level view of the park and make sure that what we're looking at for the future is meeting the needs of the community today. The process is used to develop an overall park concept that staff will use to plan future park upgrades in a phased approach. It's going to be implemented over a couple of years. 2022 will be the first year for construction, and 2024 will be the second year. So it'll be a two-phased project with a year in the middle for design works. The concept level focuses on things like location of features, the relationship amongst one another, accessibility within the park, inclusion, making sure that the usage and sustainability of the park is at the peak of what we're looking at for today's modern time. What the concept level does not do is focus on the specific details of those features as those will be developed in a later stage. During the renewal plan process, we reached out a lot to the community. We wanted to collect as much feedback as possible and hear how the community used the park. It's been great thus far. It's helped us to prepare what we're going to present today, which we're going to refer to as the renewal plan. It's the final renewal plan. And we'll take that into the next stage, which is going to be detailed design and implementation of phase 1. So I mentioned that we're looking at a concept level stage. When we look at a concept, we really focus on the ideas and relationships of the amenities within the park and how the users use them. We look at new park features, we look at gaps that might be existing in the park and how we can fill those gaps. The generic placeholders, so we use terms like play structure opposed to naming elements within the play structure. We talk about a field. We don't necessarily speak to the use of that field, but we speak of a sports field. We don't look at the materials that are being used. We basically create a vision, a map that we will use moving forward to implement this renewal plan in a detailed fashion. What we will talk about a little later in the presentation is the detailed design. As this is our last PIC for the renewal plan portion from the concept level, we're going to break out and start moving in towards detailed design where phase 1 works. During that detailed design, we'll start looking at the actual materials that are going to be used. We'll look at the amenities, we'll look at the features, the colors, the actual placement, the relationship amongst one another. And when we start doing that and get into more details, we figure out how the things actually work in the site. And there starts to be a little variation. So although we have a concept and renewal plan that we're going to use as a map, the detailed design might create some variation as you start looking at the finite details and how we actually implement those amenities. To ensure the renewal plan is successful, we've continued through this roadmap. This is our third PIC starting in February. We've had some engagements. We used Gage Hamilton platform. We used a couple different tools for the community to reach out to us and share their ideas. We've taken those ideas and they've really helped us develop. We've used those ideas and consolidated that information and prepared this renewal plan we're going to present today. The renewal plan included public information centers, community feedback. The design team analyzed that feedback, summarizing it and making sure that it was considered and incorporated where we can. We prepared concept plans that we presented at PIC number 2. Again, we opened that up for more feedback. We collected a lot of feedback at that PIC. And today we're at a point where we can present a final renewal plan that will move into the detailed design. As I just mentioned, back in February was our first PIC. We had a round of engagement. Our second PIC was in June where we presented 2 conceptual concepts. We collected the feedback from the community on those 2 concepts and we created a hybrid approach. So we meshed those 2 concepts together to prepare us for our final renewal plan concept, which we're going to present today. As I mentioned at our PIC number 3, during that session, we collected a lot of feedback. We had a lot of questions. It was a good Q&A at the end of it. I think in total we had 78 questions that we fielded that night, and we took back and we really looked at those and figured out what the breakdown was and how we were looking at this renewal plan, what the community liked and what the community thought could be improved or what we might have missed. We also launched a community feedback portion on Gage Hamilton. Now, we didn't see the responses that we received at the actual PIC, But we did receive 13 responses through Engage Hamilton, with the 3 leading target groups that would be for those looking for a larger spray pad, a relocated b-ball court, like basketball court, multi-use court. And on the next field, we'll see that enhanced green space and tree canopy was the overwhelming general consensus of those 13 comments that came in. These comments were also echoed in our PIC at the question and answer. So we've taken all that information, we've incorporated that into the design, made sure that our design reflects the needs, the wants of this community as well. So with that as a background, I'm going to hand it over to Marianne and Lesha to walk us through the renewal plan concept.
Great. Thanks so much, Wes. So we want to acknowledge that as well as an important historical space in the city, HAAA also serves a really important function or role as an important place to meet, especially over the past year or two during the pandemic. The guiding principles that we've used in order to establish the design are heritage, nature, play, and community. So we've worked hard to incorporate all of these at each stage of the design development and have made sure that they're visible in each site across the space, or in each space across the site. And then as well as the guiding principles and the overarching idea for the space, the community contributions have been really important and really key in terms of our understanding of what people need and what people want in the park, but also what's working and what isn't working. So these have been guiding principles as well throughout the development of the design. So we had this diagram in our previous presentation as well, and we wanted to just reiterate it one more time because each of the elements in a park design are balanced. So design really is a balancing act. And design happens through negotiation of these elements. So neighborhood concerns, people, access, history, space, trees, and nature, all balanced within what the budget allows for a given site. The most important thing we looked at first, as I mentioned earlier, is the neighborhood. So the key points of access in this area are, of course, Tuckett Street, Duke Street, and Kent Street, and along Charlton Avenue. These spaces right now in the park are, in some cases, just pathways. So we've used them as anchors in order to organize the larger elements of the design. So as well as these anchors, a major spine has been established through the center of the park that 3 urban spaces hang off of. And the reason we've done this is to create a sense of continuity through the space and to make sure that people who are entering the park have a place to go at each area in the park, both at the south, middle, and north end. This central spine also serves as a shared bike and pedestrian path that allows people to travel through the site, although it's not an established bike route. Each of these main plaza spaces have been coordinated as major community gathering spaces. So you can see in the drawing that at the north end of the park, there's a primary gathering space. In the center of the park, there's a community gathering space. And at the south end of the park, next to the building, there's a major gathering space. And within this organization, there are 3 subspaces that are coordinated at the entrances. And in between all of these major community gathering sites are areas for rest and areas for play. So at the north end of the site, the 2 spaces we've developed to ground the space are along at the Tuckett Street entrance and the Duke Street entrance. And we've organized them in such a way as to help slow people down when they enter the space, and also to provide a sense of refuge. So when you enter the space, you have somewhere to go, someone to talk to, and a place to sit and observe and also orient yourself when you're entering the space. Another key thing that has been a really important organizing feature of the design is coordinating the view sheds as you enter the space. So for an example, as you enter off of Duke Street, you would have a view that expanded the entire space. So it helps people orient themselves in terms of navigating the site. And then at the south end of the park, the same principles apply. We've opened up the south side and created a bleed with the street to create more space and to integrate the streetscape with the park a little bit more. And on the other end of the park, we've kept some of the constraints as they are due to the existing trees, but opened up a space for seating and for gathering at the end there, so people have a place to sit as well, and to speak and to get together. One thing that's really important about these two sites is that you can see them from either end of the park. So when you're sitting on the west end of the park in either, in the gathering space there in the seating area, you're able to see directly across the park. So this is a safety feature. And it's also important in terms of creating a sense of community, because people are able to see one another from one end of the park to the other in key areas. So this is a view off of Charlton Avenue at the area where the park has been opened up to the street. So we created this drawing just to give everyone a sense of what that might feel like. So when you're walking into the park from the street, it's no longer, in this area at least, a small path, but more of an expansive experience. So you're able to see what is beyond the threshold of the beginning of the park, as well as to spend time there in a kind of intermediary space between street and green space. So now we're going to focus a little bit on the central square. And we've given a lot of thought to this area in the park, primarily because we are imagining this as the central kind of place to meet that is really flexible and can accommodate a variety of uses and experiences and different types of people who may be interested in different types of activities in the park. So the primary organizing feature here is that the space is coordinated around two circulation routes. The first one is reflected in the 4-meter path in the large red arrow that goes through the space. And the secondary circulation route wraps around that. And the reason that the spaces follow the secondary circulation route is to allow for pedestrians and people who may be on a bike or rollerblades to use the space together. So if pedestrians are gathering, for instance, in space 3, everyone is able to see one another, and then pedestrians are able to safely navigate across into space 2 to rest or to gather or to do an activity, and then also into space 1, which is the play area. And we've wrapped that entire area with these elevated features and the covered community space in order to give the space a sense of containment, so it still feels like one space. So this is the same drawing, just in the plan, and you can see that the prefabricated shade structures are kind of containing the space, and the covered community space is at the center of that. And we've positioned it in this area so that there's like a dry area for activities such as community yoga or maybe a farmer's market, or even performances. The seating area is directly across from the space so that people can sit in such a way that they can still view what is going on in the covered community area. And this is a perspective view just to provide a sense of what that experience might be like. So how people can move through the 4-meter shared path zone, enter into the central square, and then also move onto the track down a series of stairs that serve as an overlook space to the activity there. And this section is complementary to the first slide that we just saw. It shows the relationships between the major spaces as a cross section. And you can see that the overlook that allows people to kind of linger and hang out and look over onto the field is on the far right, and then next to that is the 4-meter shared path. The pavilion central square is in the middle for flexible activities. And then the water play area steps down slightly. The reason for this is to allow the pavilion to serve also as a general overlook in both directions. So parents who are have kids who are 2 different ages, maybe some are playing frisbee on the field and others are in the spray pad, can be positioned in a central area so they have more control over where their kids are and are able to see what's happening. So this plan is a zoom in of the patio space, which we've started to call the Kirkendale patio. in lieu of the neighborhood. And the pedestrian promenade here is organized in such a way as to frame this social space. So together, the 4-meter shared path and the pedestrian promenade frame this space in order to protect it and to keep pedestrians and people who might be sitting and playing chess a little bit separate from the busyness of the two promenades. And this perspective view just provides a little bit more information on what that might look like. We've done something distinct with the paving across the site in these key gathering areas in order to give each of them an identity, as well as to link them. But here we've also included the paving in order to ground the historic building. So by putting something in front of the building, we're calling attention to its historic value, but we're also creating a social space that is distinct. And I'm going to hand things off to Marianne.
Thanks, Lesha, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to start first with some overall design principles that we are implementing with respect to the concept. There's a balance between the active play and the more quiet activities on the site, but the overriding concept is that we are trying to serve the widest range of people of all ages and abilities. So if we just linger for a moment in the play area, the park central spine that Lesha mentioned earlier also includes, the central spine is off to the right. You can see it, it says track access, but the red secondary pedestrian circulation route weaves its way through the play areas. It separates that circulation from the main circulation of the spine, but most importantly in this area, you can see that there are a number of opportunities all around the play space for secondary play space, seating areas, and places to withdraw from activity. Of course, the seating is important for the caregivers and parents who are in the site, but sometimes kids, for a variety of reasons, they need to withdraw a little bit and sit back and observe until they're ready to rejoin. So that's some of the thinking behind the play space. And there's a bit of an image of what the play space it could be. We do like to add topography to play spaces. We find it adds a lot. Just that the feeling for kids of getting up higher and then going back down again seems to be very popular. If we do them in grass in parks, they are the first thing to wear out. So we know that it works with certain ages of kids. Now, this evening, we're not going to be going into a lot of detail with respect to the play spaces, because I think Wes has mentioned that there will be a focus period and an engagement period that follows this in the next several weeks. And during that time, we'll be getting into a lot of details in terms of play equipment. So that's why we didn't get into that tonight. I will touch on some of the sports facilities that are in the park. So there are 5 general zones. One is bouldering, skate dot, the multi-use court, field sports, and the outdoor fitness. And they're generally located at the north end of the park, with number 4 is the multi-use, the bouldering next to it, skate dot on the east-west path between Tuckett and Duke, and the adult fitness or outdoor fitness, general fitness equipment generally. Bouldering is a fun activity, and although we say it's designed to challenge older children and adults, some of those people up there on the top don't look like older children. However, it is a popular pastime. This is a Canadian manufacturer who makes these boulders. This will be located at the north end of the park, and as with any elevated play feature in a park, it will have protective surfacing below. And the type of protective surfacing we're looking at is the engineered wood fiber, the same material that's currently at the existing play area and at most play areas in the city. The skate dot is it's a portion of a skate park, a small portion of a skate park that's planned or proposed along that east-west pathway between Tuckett and Duke. he's demonstrating a bit of street skating in this skate dot, and we're anticipating a feature such as that in the middle, with hopefully some banked slides so that the skaters can have a continuous loop as they play in space. So here are some images of what the multi-use court could be. It's being developed to provide sports space for hopefully a number of activities. The criteria for the multi-use court will also be developed with you in the engagement period over the next few weeks that follows. There could be line painting, nets, or maybe even a wall so that other types of ball play could be utilized in that space. But we'll see what comes about as a result of the engagement that's coming up. And I think we've mentioned before that the new track will be 350 meters in length with the colored surface. And the center of the track will feature an open space for various field sports. And it'll be welcome for everyone, of course, of all ages and abilities. We had a question after the last PIC. Someone was concerned that there wasn't connectivity in the park. And this image is just to clarify that once you come in at Duke Street or at Charlton, there is direct connection, a flush access from the walkway onto the track, and you can proceed along the north-south, along that east side of the park without any difficulty. So there is a lot of connectivity, but at this location, it is utilizing part of the track. So we just wanted to clarify that. And then a row of trees separates the track from the Ryerson School playground to the east. And a number of people have asked for outdoor fitness equipment, and it is located, as I mentioned earlier, at the north end of the park, and it's intended to provide a number of varied exercise opportunities. And this is another element that over the next few weeks, we will be gathering comments from you and ideas with respect to specifics on the types of equipment. So I'm going to go through some concepts for seating in the park. As I mentioned earlier, we'd like to develop a number of varied seating spaces throughout the park. So this is a concept for something that could happen at the existing memorial garden, perhaps a seat wall in front of the garden. Seat walls like this help to protect the gardens, so it may be an idea for that space. And then some ideas for other seating. The poured concrete wall in the upper left corner is a beautifully designed and executed wall with a bit of planting. That's one possibility. Sometimes we like to introduce natural materials into the parks, or sometimes, due to budget, an armor stone wall is what's placed. So that's a picture in the lower left corner of a armor stone seat wall in a park. If you look at the upper right-hand side of the frame, this bench is located at the Outlet Mall in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and it's typical of some of the more contemporary manufactured precast concrete benches. They're kind of fun because you can sit on them in a variety of ways and different combinations of people. So they're kind of a neat thing to have. They're kind of sculptural as well and interesting in that open space. And then at the bottom right-hand side, there is something typical that we see a lot in the parks. This is at the spray pad in Bruce Park in Hamilton on the mountain. There will be some of the standard City of Hamilton benches in the park. That's the picture that you're all familiar with on the upper right-hand corner of the page. They will be situated a bit differently, though, in the renewed park. They will be on concrete slabs, similar to what you see below. The bench below is actually part of this community's fitness equipment. The benches are located along a path, and each of those signs show a different way to stretch and use the equipment. So this is taken in a park in Niagara Falls. The image on the left-hand side is, I quite like it because I thought it was quite clever the way they situated the seating in between trees. and the gaps between allow spaces to store backpacks and strollers, and there could be wheelchairs or walkers in between there as well. There will be variation throughout the park on the benches with respect to accessibility. Like some of these benches I've shown you don't have backs on them. And in terms of accessibility, generally a backed bench with arms of different configurations are found throughout open spaces, primarily due to AODA. So there may be a bench with an end arm missing so that someone can transfer easily from a walker or wheelchair. Some of them have two arms at one end so that people that need two hands to get in and out of the bench can access them that way. So we'll be looking at that carefully and making sure that there's a large variety of seating throughout the park in a number of forms. And again, this is something else that we'll be covering in the engagement period that follows. We'd like to hear what you think about all of these benches and the different scenarios. So we'll conclude with a little bit about the trees in terms of the design section. This community has done a lot of work assisting with the Hamilton urban forest strategy. And one of the planting concepts for the park is, one, to increase the native species. They're only 2.4% right now. And also to increase the percentage of canopy cover. It's 24%. It's not bad, but we're hoping to be able to get up to 39 to 40% once the park is complete. For those of you that attended the last PIC, we showed this image of just a sense of the passage of time. The park was first built in the 1970s and the trees were quite young. Now they're mature. So it's just to get a sense for when the trees are planted in the park, they will look quite small as seen on section 1 in the upper left or in the plan to your right. But this is just to illustrate a bit of the passage of time. And eventually there will be a lovely canopy that is completed at the park. 20 years, 10 years. But we think it's worth it to get those trees in there. We always worry about the health of trees after they're planted. And one of the things that is quite detrimental is the silent tree killer, which is root compaction. So it's inevitable to have root compaction if you have trees near playgrounds or in schoolyards or parks. But we will try our best in terms of a strategy to locate the trees in places where they will have the best chance of surviving. So if you look up at the upper right-hand corner at the trees along the east side at the school, one way of doing this is to put fencing up between the park and the school property, but with pathways between, maybe 2, maybe 3, so that all of the pedestrian traffic is concentrated in those areas and the soil is not compacted in the other areas where the fence is preventing that happening. Another area, it's a little bit off the clip, but would be the west side as well. The west side, there are gaps there that we can fill with trees, and they will be quite useful in providing buffering between the residential properties, but also those are areas where there won't be a lot of foot traffic. Of course, there is a row of trees at the north end, and they'll be fairly protected. And if you look in that diagram at the very bottom, you see 5 trees at the patio. Those trees are intended to go into soil cells. And I think Wes talked about those the last time. Soil cells are what we use in paved areas in order to provide enough soil so the trees can survive and protect them from compaction. So that's intended at the south end. So this concludes the design component of the presentation, and I'd like to now turn the presentation over to Wes for the summary.
So a couple other things that are going on in the background as part of this renewal plan. I mentioned earlier that we were doing a cultural heritage evaluation report. So that is a study that looks at the site and the history of the site. It's completed by a cultural heritage and gets submitted to our city's heritage planners, and also gets submitted to the Inventory and Research Working Group, which forms part of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee. So this report's completed in the first phase, which is a background study on the site based on the history of the site. That's submitted to the Heritage Committee, and that committee is going to look at potentially designating this land on the registry, the municipal registry. What that registry means is it's an inventory that city has to keep track of their heritage value sites, to make sure there's a link, make sure there's a linkage between them, a place that the community can go to and look up the heritage, and they can go see them and their maps. So we can have a tour if people really wanted to go see the heritage value that we have in the city. In this area, it's very rich in heritage value. Listing on the registry, not the same. The listed properties are not submerged permits. They are also not governed by a lot of regulatory issues for it. So when you look at this site, let's use the renewal plan as a concept, as an idea. We have a cultural heritage evaluation report and an impact assessment. The evaluation report identifies the heritage value of the site. The impact assessment helps us do the design work and see how we can reflect that heritage and how we can show that heritage within our design. So there might be opportunities for the field and the history of the site. I know Marianne mentioned earlier about Memorial Garden. We have a couple plaques on site. We want to make that more predominant in the site. We want to make it an area rather than just being at the front entrance that a lot of people might not even know it's there at times. And to be honest with you, it's been vandalized in the past, looking to create a bigger presence of the history of the site. We're also completing a stage 1 archaeological assessment. So a stage 1 study is really a desktop study. So we evaluate the site. Archaeologists will attend the site, they'll take pictures, they'll do the background research of it. That will guide them on the history from an archaeological standpoint. And if it is deemed that there might be some archaeological value, a stage 2 would be warranted. Now, a stage 2 is actually when they go out and they break ground. So they do test pitting. So they break ground, they do some test pitting in areas where they might find archaeological value. And then that might dictate if we go to a stage 3, a stage 4, which is a little bit more extensive. That's currently underway. The Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report, that will be posted on the project's website for all to see. You can go on there. We just have our consultant making a couple of changes word-wise, a couple of corrections that we found. And we're going to, once we have that finalized, we'll post it on the project website. The stage 1 archaeological investigation. That takes a while. So they'll complete that and then they'll submit it to the ministry. And then it goes through a process with the ministry. As part of that, we will do consultation with the Indigenous communities in the area, and we will reach out and start that dialogue with them. So these are two things that are also feeding into the renewal plan that you might not see up front. It's not something that we typically have anything to present at this time, but they are studies that are going on, and we will be able to present them via the website and Engage Hamilton site for your viewing pleasures. So that brings us to the next steps. Marianne, let's just talk through our design or what the renewal plan is. What do we do with it now? So we've mentioned in our previous PICs that our goal for the end of the renewal plan was to come up with a roadmap. We have that roadmap now. Now we start looking at the phase 1 and phase 2 works, and we start to break that down into detail. So the next section that we will be going into is the phase 1 engagement. So when we say phase 1 engagement, what we will start to do is we will start to use different interactive tools to look at the amenities that are found in phase 1. As of now, our phase 1 amenities or our phase 1 scope will include the play structure, the spray pad, the basketball court, pathways, seating on the western side of the park. These works will happen in 2022, but we anticipate launching our engagement strategy, like our engagement for this next phase, how we can collect that community feedback. Trying to launch that about December 6th, and it'll be open to mid-January. And the image that you see here is basically a cut line, a break line of where our phase 1, phase 2 works will be completed. We do have some tricky situations that we have to deal with because the phase 2 works is the track, and that track is actually larger than what you see on the screen right now. So to keep that in place for phase 1, we have to make sure of what we do in phase 1 isn't going to be disturbed when we do phase 2 works. So we're balancing a fine line on what we can complete in phase one. And when we start looking at the details, we really have to figure out those logistics to make sure what we can complete in phase one is what we're presenting today. Our general understanding is that we can do this. We might unearth something, we might uncover something with grading or general circulation. We do anticipate keeping the circulation routes connecting from the north to the south to make sure that we always have that passageway. Phase one works, we plan on including the playground area, spray pad, multi-use courts, some of the pathways, seating, plantings, and some of the servicing that we'll need to do to get to that spray pad. Our phase two works, which will be completed in 2024, will be the right side of that, what we see in blue right here. They will really touch on what Lesher referred to as the Kirkendall patio, the track, the sports field, the skate dot, the bouldering areas, the adult fitness, and the other connections that we have. It will also include a lot of the major plantings that we do. So phase one will be in 2022, phase two being in 2024. We will commence the design portion of phase two in 2023, where we reach back out to the community again. So at this point, that's the renewal plan that we will launch. There's still lots of opportunity for us to work together. Going from this, we mentioned we're going to do the phase one engagement. So we're going to do most of that via our Engage Hamilton platform. We do have opportunity that we will work with the Ward 1 office and try to get onto the actual physical site and reach out and do some face-to-face meets at HAAA ground. We're going to have some opportunities for us to ask questions. Other than tonight, you can go to Engage Hamilton and ask a question via that platform. We have something called a guest book, which you might be familiar with from our PIC number 2 and our concept comments. It's basically an opportunity where you can go on there, you can put an open concept, an open idea, an open question to us that will be public. So it becomes more of a transparent process for everybody. We're going to relaunch that idea tool that launched in PIC number 1. That's where we collected a lot of ideas and a lot of photos came in, and then others from the community could give the thumbs up, vote it up. We're going to do the same thing. It's going to be more focused now. We're going to actually focus on the playground, the spray pad, and the multi-use court for phase 1 works. I know Marianne mentioned earlier about that adult equipment. That's actually going to land in phase 2. We're more than happy to talk about anything that could be landed in phase 2, but for the most part, our focus is going to be on the works of phase 1. We will have some surveys that will be completed, but we'll also have some reading materials. So we're going to provide some backgrounds, philosophies on the play structures, and things that we should think about when we're designing and picking what we want to see in the park. As I mentioned, we are looking at an opportunity to actually meet at HAAA, see what we can do. So we're hoping that we can do like a democracy exercise at HAAA, hopefully by the new year or potentially in early January. From that point, the design team will take that input and we'll start to work on that detailed design. We are anticipating in the spring to be able to go to tender and start construction in the late spring, early summer. That's our goal right now. Now, because we're dealing with a concept level, when we look at costing and we look at ideas that work, we're really working off a 30% plus minus cost factor when we're looking at this. We would classify that as a Class D cost estimate. So as we start breaking these details down in a little bit more finite information, you start realizing, okay, we can't do this portion because it impacts this in phase 2. So there's a lot of work for us to make sure the logistics of the phase 1, we can deliver it. So we'll be working on that in the background as we start doing this engagement. Obviously, once we start looking at those finite details, we start looking at those budgets as well. As we mentioned, that is what we're looking to do in phase 1, but it could change. The footprint of the site is our goal in the end. The amenities that are included in phase 1, that is our main goal right now, but there is opportunity that we could reduce it or we could actually add on to it, depending on how this works as we start looking at the detailed design portion. So with that, I'm going to thank you for joining us tonight.